You know, you're running for Senate out there in Indiana. You've represented the House, and before that, you were in the state legislature. I was in Iowa a couple weeks ago at the state fair and had a really interesting conversation with the governor, Kim Reynolds, about where the folks in the Midwest are. And in Iowa, it seems as though the Democrats have just thrown their hands up and said, we'll give you guys Iowa. We're not going to come to the state fair. We're going to move our caucus. We've kind of ceded Iowa. I think of Indiana, and I don't know, you obviously know better than I do, but it was, 10 years ago that you had Evan Bayh and some Democrats, and it seems like it's trending the same way. Is this a state phenomena? Is this Indiana in a bubble? Is this Iowa in a bubble? Obviously, Wisconsin has been competitive. Or is this a trend where the Democrats have ceded the Midwest?
I think it's a trend, Sean. I mean, the Senate seat that I'm running for, by the way, was held by a Democrat just 6 years ago. So now fast forward to this point, and it doesn't appear the Democrats are even competing in states like Indiana. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that. But, you know, when I kicked off my campaign in mid-January, I thought my likely Democrat opponent would be Pete Buttigieg. He and I share something in common with you. We both served in the Navy Reserves. We both went to Afghanistan at the same time. He joined the Biden administration. He put his best friend in charge of the Indiana Democrat Party to build it back up so he could come home and run for governor or Senate at this point. And what did he just do 6 months ago? He and his husband just moved to Michigan. They are now full-time residents of Michigan. He completely deserted the state of Indiana, which gave him the opportunity to be mayor of South
I'm
Bend.
Sure that upsets you. I'm sure that upsets you tremendously.
I wouldn't be afraid to run against him to begin with. But case in point, Democrats know they can't win in states like Iowa and Indiana because they've completely abandoned working class rural America. And those people who are feeling the effects of the Biden economy and the disastrous Biden administration are people who come from places like where I come from, the fentanyl epidemic, the wide open border that's flooding fentanyl into this country, and in places like rural Indiana, the leading cause of death of Americans my age, of working age, of military eligible age. What the Democrats have done is sell our country out and our manufacturing jobs to China. They're fully responsible for it at this point. Donald Trump made the Republican Party the party of the working class again for the first time since Ronald Reagan was president. And Democrats are the ones who are selling us out to multinational corporations and their interest and sending our jobs to China. And states like Indiana, even Ohio is now a hard red, barn red state. We're going to win back the Senate seat in Ohio. It's going to be one of the seats that we need to win back the Senate majority, and it's because of this trend as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You mentioned China and your service in the military. There was a report over the weekend that came out that 100 Chinese nationals have tried to enter military installations in the U.S., just posing as tourists. They have gotten more and more brazen. They hacked the Secretary of Commerce's website, email. They're showing up at our military bases. I get. The thing that I find funny about this, actually, I don't find it funny. I find it sad, is that the brazenness knows no limits. And yet we can't even ban TikTok. I don't get what's going on Capitol Hill on a bipartisan basis, but on the Republican side, where's the outrage? We go through COVID, we come out and we're still buying more and more from them. Everyone keeps acting like somehow they're like a long lost cousin that we just need to bring home as opposed to an enemy.
Yeah. The Congress should take a note out of Indiana's playbook. Our state legislature in Indiana last year passed a law to ban the Chinese from buying land around military bases and crack down on the Chinese buying farmland, other measures. Those are things that the Congress should do. And states like Indiana have been leading the way in doing that at the state level. It's why we started the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, led by my colleague Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin. It's a bipartisan committee. We're looking into these issues, but really I think is a centerpiece, a legacy opportunity for this House Republican majority, putting a focus where there wasn't one before. I mean, I look at, you talk about Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, her emails were hacked And instead of being outraged and doing something about it, what does she do? She goes to China and meets with the same people who just hacked her email. And she says she complained
But
about
she said
it.
she complained.
I mean, she looks completely weak. But it's symbolic of the entire Biden administration. They continue to play footsie with our biggest enemy. We had the toughest president we ever had on China and Trump. We have the weakest in Joe Biden and his administration, who continues to sell us out after China stole our jobs. They steal our intellectual property. They steal our military secrets. They gave us COVID. And now they're the chief manufacturer of fentanyl, the leading cause of death of Americans of working age in this country, and they're flooding our country for it. And we have an administration that completely turns a blind eye, plays footsie with them, rewards them for their bad activity by sending our leaders over there to meet with them instead of cracking down on them and sanctioning them instead. So Republicans in the House have a game plan. We have a committee that's wholly dedicated to looking at what we can do to hold them accountable and put America back on its feet and in charge, instead of letting China dominate us in the short and near term, like they're bound to do if Joe Biden remains in charge.
So you talk about how bad Joe Biden is doing, and it is ironic, especially on the fentanyl stuff. They're apparently going to attack Republicans. They don't fund the government for the effect it would have on fentanyl that comes in the country through the open border. There's a lot of calls when the House does return to impeach Joe Biden. Kevin McCarthy keeps talking about this inquiry. Where do you come down on what the tactic should be? Should there be a full-on inquiry? Should the House vote on an inquiry? I mean, I've laid this out politically. If you don't have a guy like Don Bacon and a couple of these other folks, and you have a vote and it fails, that doesn't look good. So I think there's a political consequence.
Yeah, Sean, I don't know that the votes are there at this point. I wish they were, because I'm ready to vote for impeachment of the
what would you
corrupt.
what? So let me ask you this: what the Constitution says, bribery, treason, high crimes, and misdemeanor. What do you think that Joe Biden? When you get asked about this in Indiana, what has Joe Biden done to merit impeachment?
Well, he's completely sold himself out to our biggest enemies over a decades of public service. So, and that's a fact. I mean, Hoosiers know it. They've seen it. They get it. What President Biden and his family have done to sell themselves out, selling access to Joe Biden as senator, as vice president. This is why the impeachment inquiry is important, to look at some of those financial entanglements while he was vice president. Hunter Biden taking millions of dollars from the Chinese Communist Party, from corrupt Russian oligarchs tied to the Russian government and elsewhere, and what those entanglements led to in decision making on behalf of this president while he's been in the highest office. So, not to mention the corrupt abuses of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and how they've manipulated the investigations and prosecution of Hunter Biden and the Biden family as well. I believe the evidence is there. I think, to your point, though, I'm not sure that the votes are there yet, which is why the impeachment inquiry and that process has to begin to shed light on this process. But theoretically, if we voted to impeach Joe Biden, I know that the Senate is probably not going to remove him from office, but I think it's very important for that transparency to occur, for that trial in the Senate to occur, so the American people can see the facts that they were deprived of in the 2020 election, when big tech and big media censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, which I believe very well would have changed the outcome of the 2020 election in a big way. I mean, the polling shows it. All of that evidence was withheld from the American people and diminished, when now we know it was all true.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.